My name is Eliza Morgan. I'm 36 years old. Last March, I sat in a mahogany conference room while my father's attorney adjusted his glasses and said the sentence that confirmed something I had suspected for years. The estate transfers in full to Daniel Morgan, my older brother. Not partially, not proportionally, in full. And what my parents didn't realize when they rewrote that will was that they forgot one signature. But before I tell you how a single missing signature unraveled a decade of favoritism, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if stories about family betrayal, inheritance drama, and quiet legal reversals resonate with you. And tell me where you're watching from. I read those. Now let me take you back to the years before that conference room, because inheritances don't shift overnight. They're engineered. Quietly. My brother Daniel has always been the visible one. Athletic, confident, effortlessly charming. My parents loved that about him. My mother called him born to lead. My father called him the future of the family. I was the practical one. Numbers, planning, risk assessment. I became a CPA at 27, opened my own firm at 32. My parents called it safe. Daniel launched a chain of boutique fitness studios at 29. My father invested $120,000. He's building something, he'd say proudly. 2 studios failed. 1 survived. Daniel called it expansion. My father called it vision. When I purchased my first commercial property, my mother said, "You're so cautious." Cautious! Like it was a flaw. My parents owned 3 assets of real value. The family home, 2 rental properties downtown, and a 14-acre parcel of land outside the city. The land was originally my grandmother's, and that land was the quiet heart of the estate. Every holiday dinner ended with my father saying, "One day, Daniel will expand there." Expand? What? He never clarified. Just expand. I noticed something over the years. When paperwork came to the table, my name was rarely mentioned. Daniel handled vision. I handled taxes. And somewhere in that division, my parents decided something dangerous. That inheritance should reward charisma, not stability. 2 years before my father's stroke, they rewrote their will. I wasn't told. I found out because my mother accidentally mentioned a planning session at dinner. "Daniel needs clarity," she said lightly. "Clarity about what?" I asked. "About succession." Succession. Interesting word. When my father passed, my mother followed 7 months later. Sudden. Cardiac. No prolonged goodbye. Just paperwork. The will reading was scheduled for a Tuesday at 2 p.m. Daniel arrived early. Confident. Almost relaxed. His wife, Marissa, wore black but looked composed. I arrived with a folder. Not because I expected conflict. Because I don't attend legal meetings unprepared. The attorney, Mr. Halpern, began reading. Standard allocations. Personal belongings. Charitable donations. Then, the estate transfers in full to Daniel Morgan. Silence. Just a small shift in oxygen. Not a mistake. Not ambiguous. Full. I didn't react, because reacting feeds narrative. Daniel glanced at me briefly. Sympathy flickered. Briefly. "Eliza is provided a one-time distribution of $50,000, Mr. Halpern added. 50. From an estate valued at approximately $3.8 million. Interesting. Daniel cleared his throat. I didn't know it was structured like that. He did. He had attended the planning session. I knew that because my mother had slipped once. You were there, I said calmly. Marissa squeezed his hand. It's what your parents wanted, she said softly. Wanted. That word carries weight. But it doesn't override law, because here's the part they didn't anticipate. I had also attended something 2 years ago. Not a dinner, not a planning session, a zoning board meeting. About that 14-acre parcel. The land. The quiet heart of the estate. And that's where the missing signature lived. Mr. Halpern closed the folder. That concludes the reading. I nodded once. No tears. No accusation. Just observation. Daniel exhaled. I'll make sure you're taken care of, he said gently. There it was. Paternal tone. Charitable. I don't need to be taken care of, I replied. Silence. Marissa shifted slightly in her chair. "It's just paperwork," she said lightly. "No, it wasn't. It was positioning. But paperwork can be reversed if it's incomplete." And when I opened my folder after that meeting, the document inside wasn't emotional. It was structural. Because while they rewrote their will, they forgot that land ownership requires something very specific. And without it, the full transfer wasn't full at all. I didn't argue at the will reading. I didn't accuse Daniel of manipulation. I didn't challenge Mr. Halpern in the room. Because probate isn't emotional. It's procedural. And procedure requires leverage. The leverage wasn't in the house. It wasn't in the rental properties. Those were clearly deeded. The leverage was in the land. 14 acres on the edge of town. Undeveloped. Undervalued. Unnoticed. Except by me. 2 years earlier, when the zoning board had proposed expanding commercial access near that area, I attended the meeting. Not because my parents asked me to. Because I track value shifts. Access roads change land classification. Land classification changes valuation. And valuation changes leverage. At that meeting, I noticed something small. The land wasn't solely in my parents' names. It was jointly held. 3 names. Robert Morgan, Eleanor Morgan, and Eliza Morgan. Mine. Not majority, but joint. Why? Because when my grandmother transferred the property decades ago, she structured it as joint tenancy among her children and 1 grandchild. Me. I was 22 when the deed was recorded, fresh out of college. And my father had said casually, "It's cleaner for estate tax planning." Cleaner. Interesting word. I didn't question it then, but I remembered it. And when the will transferred the estate in full to Daniel, I knew something critical. Wills transfer ownership only of assets solely owned. Joint tenancy doesn't pass through probate. It passes automatically to the surviving tenant, which, at the time of my father's death, was my mother and me. And when my mother passed, the deed transferred fully to the last surviving joint tenant, me, automatically. No signature required. No probate oversight. Just record. But here's where the missing signature mattered. 2 years ago, when my parents rewrote the will, they had attempted to retitle the land solely in their names. Mr. Halpern drafted the deed transfer, but the deed required 3 signatures. My father's, my mother's, and mine. They had theirs. They didn't have mine, because they never asked. And without my signature, the transfer never recorded. The county clerk rejected it, silently. No drama, just incomplete. And incomplete deeds don't change ownership. The morning after the will reading, I drove to the county records office. Not because I was uncertain, because documentation is stronger when printed. I requested the latest deed record for parcel 17042. The clerk slid the certified copy across the counter. I read it slowly. Owner of record, Eliza Morgan. Sole surviving joint tenant. Clear title. No encumbrances. No transfer recorded. No signature from me. I folded the document carefully, placed it in my folder, and drove home. Not triumphant, just aligned. At 3:14 p.m., Daniel called. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes, I didn't know it was structured like that. You were at the meeting." "That was estate planning, not this." "Interesting distinction. You're not upset?" he asked cautiously. "No, that's surprising." "Why?" "Because it's not equal." Equal. He used the word now. Interesting. "Do you believe in equal?" I asked calmly. "Yes." "Then we should talk about the land." Silence. What land? The tone shifted. Not ignorance. Guarded. "The 14 acres, I replied. "That's part of the estate." "No. Yes. No. Silence. Eliza. It's joint tenancy. That was corrected." "No. It was retitled." "No. It was supposed to be." "Yes." Silence. "I never signed," I said. Silence. Longer now. "Dad said you agreed?" I didn't. He said it was cleaner. For taxes. And it required my signature. Silence. Where are you going with this? Daniel asked carefully. To the county clerk's office. Silence. It's still in joint tenancy. More silence. And with Mom gone, I continued evenly, it transferred automatically. To who? He asked, though he already knew. To me. That was the first time the oxygen shifted on the other end of the line. That's not possible. It is. That land was meant for expansion. By who? Dad always said. Dad always said a lot of things. Silence. You're telling me you own it? He asked. Yes. All of it? Yes. Silence. And the will? Doesn't override joint tenancy. Silence. He exhaled slowly. That land is worth over $1 million. Yes. And you're just sitting on that? I'm not sitting. Silence. You're not going to challenge the will? He asked. No. That unsettled him more than a lawsuit would have. Why not? Because I don't need to. Silence. What do you want? He asked finally. There it was. Negotiation. Not apology. Not recalibration. Transaction. I want clarity, I said calmly. On what? On how you view fairness. Silence. You're holding leverage, he said. I'm holding title. And there's a difference. 2 days later, Mr. Halpern called me directly. Eliza, he said carefully. Daniel mentioned the land. Yes. We believed the retitling had been completed. It wasn't. You declined to sign? I was never asked. Silence. That complicates distribution. No, I replied. It clarifies it. Because here's what Daniel hadn't anticipated. He thought the will was total control. He thought the headline number, $3.8 million, was the entire estate. He didn't calculate the parcel, the quiet asset, the one that compounds, the one with development potential. And without my signature, the family failure wasn't just equal. She was sole owner. Daniel showed up at my office the next morning. No smirk, no sympathy, just recalculation. You knew, he said immediately. Yes, you sat in that room knowing. Yes, and you let the will reading finish. Yes, why? Because you called it full. Silence. You could have corrected it there. Yes, why didn't you? Because you called me the cautious one. Silence. You're not going to sell it, he said. No, you're going to develop. Yes, with who? My firm. He stared at me. You're playing long. Yes, that's manipulative. No, I replied evenly. That's prepared. Silence. You always do this, he said. Do what? Wait. Yes, and then move. Yes, that unsettled him. Because waiting looks like weakness. Until it doesn't. You're not the failure, he said quietly. No. You're not small. No. Silence. And you never were. That landed. Not as praise. As recalibration. But here's the part he hadn't realized yet. Owning the land wasn't the final shift. It was what I intended to build on it. Because the zoning change from 2 years ago, the one I attended quietly, had just been approved for commercial expansion. And the development proposal I filed 3 weeks before my father's death was already under review. And when the city council agenda posted next month, they wouldn't just read my name at the closing. They'd read it at the podium as primary developer of the Bennett expansion corridor. And that's when family failure would mean something entirely different. City council meetings are not glamorous. Fluorescent lighting, folding chairs, microphones that squeal slightly before they stabilize. But what they lack in elegance, they make up for in permanence. Once something is recorded in council minutes, it becomes part of the city's memory. 3 weeks after the will reading, the public agenda went live. Item 7, proposal review. Bennett expansion corridor applicant, Eliza Morgan. Not Daniel Morgan. Not Morgan Development Group. Eliza. Full name. Printed. Documented. Permanent. I didn't send the link to anyone. I didn't announce it. I didn't even mention it to Daniel. Because leverage doesn't shout. It appears. Daniel found out on his own. He called me at 8:17 p.m. You filed that before Dad died. Yes, you knew. Yes, you knew the zoning would pass. I anticipated it. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask. Silence. You're doing this deliberately, he said. Yes. No denial. No softening. Because there's no virtue in pretending you're not strategic. You let me think the will was everything, he continued. It was everything to you. Silence. And to you? He asked. It was incomplete. Silence. You're building on that land. Yes. Commercial? Yes. What kind? Mixed use. Retail and office. Silence. You don't have the scale for that. I have the capital. Silence. You're going to leverage the land against the will. No. I'm leveraging preparation against assumption. That landed. Because that's what this had always been. Assumption. He assumed charisma would inherit. He assumed volume would dominate. He assumed I would react emotionally to being cut out. I didn't. I executed. The council meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. on a Thursday. Daniel sat in the back row, arms crossed. Not hostile. Assessing. A few familiar faces were there. Local developers. Investors. My former clients. When my name was called, I stood calmly. Walked to the podium. Adjusted the microphone. My name is Eliza Morgan, I began. Clear. Measured. Prepared. I am the sole owner of the 14-acre Bennett parcel located off East Ridge Road, murmurs. Not loud. Just awareness. Because that parcel had been the Morgan land for decades. Public perception lags behind paperwork. This proposal outlines a phased commercial development structured to align with the newly approved zoning expansion. I spoke for 8 minutes. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just data. Projected tax revenue. Employment creation. Infrastructure alignment. I didn't mention the will. I didn't mention Daniel. I didn't mention family. Because this wasn't emotional territory. It was municipal. And municipalities don't care about sibling dynamics. They care about feasibility. When I finished, Councilman Hayes cleared his throat. Miss Morgan, you're proceeding independently? Yes. Not as part of Morgan Development? No. Silence. Not hostile. Just definitive. Very well, he said. The vote wasn't that night. It was procedural. But the record was made. And records don't bend for opinion. Outside, after the meeting, Daniel approached me. You didn't need to say sole owner, he said. I did. Why emphasize it? I didn't. You did. I stated fact. Silence. You're enjoying this, he said. No, you look calm. I am. That's worse, because calm implies control. You're not angry, he added. I was, and now I'm positioned. That word hung there. Not aggressive, not smug, positioned. You could have worked with me, he said. You didn't invite me. Silence. You never told me you were filing. You never told me you were restructuring the will. That landed. Not as retaliation. As symmetry. You're not the failure, he said quietly. No, you never were. No, I wasn't. I was just quiet. And quiet doesn't photograph well at dinner tables. But it records well in council minutes. 2 weeks later, the vote passed unanimously. Development approved. Phase 1 construction slated for early spring. The local business journal ran a short feature. CPA turned developer leads Bennett corridor expansion. They printed my name in bold. Not Daniel's. Not Morgan Development. Mine. My father had once said I hid behind spreadsheets. Now the spreadsheets were scaffolding. And the land he assumed would automatically pass to his son was under construction. Not because I fought the will. Because I understood the deed. The title officer had read my name aloud at closing. The council clerk read it again at approval. And suddenly, family failure sounded less like truth and more like projection. Daniel came to my office one final time. No tension, no accusation, just recalibration. You built quietly, he said. Yes, you always did. Yes, I thought that meant small. No, it meant patient. Yes, patient. Patient compounds. Volume burns. An inheritance doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the prepared. My dad called me the family failure. Until the title officer read my name aloud, he just forgot. I had already signed where it mattered. If you've ever been underestimated for playing the long game, tell me in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.